Hey listeners, listen here. This episode is twice as long as our usual episodes, but it's probably 4 times as important as our usual episodes, so you might want to give it a listen anyway. Enjoy! On the Shoulders of Dwarves, a weekly podcast about role-playing games. Hello and welcome to On the Shoulders of Dwarves, a weekly podcast about role-playing games and the gamers who game them. My name is Eran Aviram.
My name is Uri Lifshitz. Yo!
And today we have a guest. Guest, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Avner Shachar Kashtan. I am a long-time role player, occasional DM, but mostly a player, and a fan of this show.
Oh, thank you. And Avner helped us create probably one of the most important episodes we've ever done in our original Hebrew edition. And now we've decided to call him again, to do it again, this time in English, because we really think might be one of the most important things, well, personally, as a player at GM, that I've ever heard, the topic of player motivations. Why we come to the table and play, and why we should care about these motivations. It's such a fundamental part of enjoyment, knowing what you enjoy, that we really should discuss it. So, Avner, why are you qualified to discuss this?
A few years back, I was working with a friend, a co-worker, in an office that was above a pool hall, and we would go down occasionally to play pool. And this friend was much better than me at playing pool, and yet I consistently had more fun than he did. I had more fun because he was a good player. He studied the game, he watched games on television, he practiced, and it was very important to him to win. I was not a good player. I played very chaotically. I liked the sound of balls hitting each other, and I was good enough to win, 30% of the time. For me, 30% of the time was just fine to give me everything I wanted from the game. For him, losing 30% of the time was terrible. I had that story in the back of my mind for a couple of years, and then a few years ago, I was giving a talk in a local science fiction and role-playing convention, and it melded together with the things I wanted to say when I understood that the same thing happens around the gaming table. When people come to the gaming table, whether they enjoy themselves or not, has a lot to do with what they want to find around the gaming table. And it's not always the same thing. And the same people can sit around the same table and have the same game and come out with extremely different experiences because they were not looking for the same thing, even though theoretically they were all looking for a role-playing game, even more specifically, a dungeon-crawling D&D game. Two people can come to the same game with different expectations, different motivations, and have different experiences.
I think there's even a step further, and that is the realization that you might come one day to a game wanting this and that, and another day you'll come and you want that and this. And your own motivations might change between sessions, and you should be aware of that as well.
Very true. I played a lot of Ars Magica over the years. Ars Magica, if anyone not familiar, is a fantastic role-playing game published by Atlas Games. In medieval Europe, you play wizards in medieval Europe. And the interesting thing about this game, which has been in print since the late 80s and has 5 editions, is what they call a troop-style role-playing game, meaning that there is usually a primary storyteller, primary game master, but it might change between stories, and everyone has more than one character. Every player has his main character, the wizard that he's playing, but also a secondary character, might be a knight or a helper or some other relatively major character. And also there are minor characters, grogs, guards, common soldiers, and so forth, which might be a player's character, they might be like a pool of characters that other players can take, and different adventures might involve different combinations of characters. So one day you're playing your wizard, you're the main character of the story that's being told, you're leading the charge against whatever, or looking for ancient artifacts. And another session, you're just playing the guard. You're playing what is usually either a small role or a comic relief or something that's not as central to the plot. And playing a lot of Ars Magica helps you realize that you can have very different experiences in the game. You can come because you want to be part of the story, or you can come because you just want to have some fun and do the comic relief, and that may change from session to session.
I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with other theories about role-playing games and game motivation in general. We had a few years back the GNS theory, which stands for Gamism, Narrativism, and Simulation, which is one way of trying to analyze our gaming session and what we enjoy of those sessions. During this episode, we will not be comparing what we talk about here to any other theories. This is not a comparative episode. This episode has the aim of giving you a brand new tool, or to be more precise, a list of motivations. Some of them I'm sure you are aware of, some of them will be totally new to you, and hopefully what we aim for is while you're listening to this episode, you'll suddenly say something like, oh yeah, I enjoy that aspect of the game, or wow, that is a huge turnoff for me, and now I have a name for that, so I could tell people, listen, don't do that, it's a big turnoff for me.
Avner, let us start with a short historic overview.
Yes.
How did we come to this motivation thing? Because we didn't start with this.
No, after Uri says we will not be comparing things, let us compare some things now. Growing up as a role player in the 90s, there was a division that was everywhere, that everyone seemed to know between different kinds of role players, but it took me a while to find where they were actually defined. And this was the division of players between power gamers and role players and war gamers and storytellers. It was something that was in the culture when I started the role playing, and I had no idea where it actually came from. And eventually I found that it can be traced back to an article by Glenn Blacko called Aspects of Adventure Gaming from 1980. Very early in the hobby's history. And I'm sure Eran will provide a link in the show notes. Basically, this article tries to catalog different styles of play or different types of gamers. We know the names, we know the stereotypes. Power gamers like to have strong characters that can beat everything. Role players like to deeply play their role and express themselves dramatically. War gamers like the tactical aspect of the game, and storytellers like to tell stories. These are very rough stereotypes, and they're usually contrasted. They're saying, power gamers and role players can never play together because they want different things from the game. But it was a good, primitive, rough division of styles of play. 20 years or so passed, and this categorization got a bit more fine-grained. In 2001, Robin D. Laws, who is a fantastic game designer and has a great role-playing podcast as well, if you want.
Yep. Ken and Robin talk about stuff. We'll give a link to that as well in the show notes.
Wrote a book of tips for game masters where he took Blacko's original model and expanded it a bit. I still think that he missed a couple of points there that we can, from our perspective, see where he missed, but I think the additions he made to this categorization are very important to where we're going. He added 3 kinds of players: the specialist, the butt kicker, and the casual player. Yes. And the reason I think they're important is because they're no longer rough categories of gaming style, power gamers and role players, but they approach what we talked about and what we talked about earlier about motivations, about why we come to the table. A casual player comes to the table because he wants to have fun with his friends, and this is what his friends are doing. A butt kicker wants something to vent his annoyance at his boss somewhere, so he goes out and kills goblins in dungeons.
Now, it's important to say that the butt kicker is not the same as the war gamer, because it sounds like they're the same thing. They want to fight, they want to have combats. But I think the wargamer actually wants to have interesting tactical decisions and use their strength in interesting ways, while the butt kicker just wants to kick something, maybe like rolling a lot of dice and dealing a lot of damage and, as you said, venting frustration.
Exactly, yeah.
I think it's a complete error to make a comparison between the wargamer and the butt kicker, because we are talking about different things. This is type of players, and this is the type of player motivation.
Exactly. This is why we're approaching what we're actually here to talk about this episode. I mean, the butt kicker would probably have been a subset of the power gamer before this categorization. As our hobby matures, we find more categorizations, finer grained categorizations of what we do and why we do what we do. And then, as I was reading for that lecture in 2015, I fell down the rabbit hole and came back to 1958, slightly before the first role-playing games, and the French sociologist named Roger Caillois, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He wrote a book in 1958, which was translated to English in 1961, called Man, Play, and Games, which is an academic sociological text about why people play games and how they play games. I did not read the whole book. I read some of it. It was fascinating because it had absolutely nothing to do with role-playing games at first, but then you can see how the models he built there can be applied to role-playing games. Caillois defined 4 approaches to games, 4 things that we get from a game, reasons we approach a game and what we can get from it, and what causes enjoyment from that game. Since this is an academic text, we're dropping down to Greek and Latin. We'll get a lot of that later on. And 4 categories described are Agon or Agon, which is the enjoyment of defeating a rival. Alea or luck, which is the enjoyment in, winning a roll of a die or a flip of a coin, the enjoyment of luck. Mimesis, which is pretending. It's a game where you enjoy pretending to be something else. We think, role-playing, this is what we do, but the original text talk about things like children pretending to be animals and, roaring like a lion. This is the form of play he referred to. And Ilinx, which is the enjoyment in confusing your senses and losing yourself in play. Like the actual physical adrenaline and the running around and the physical aspect of the game.
Which is usually something that we might get in a LARP, in a live-action roleplay, but not so much around the table.
Not too much, no.
Yeah, but the others seem... I mean, he was talking about games in general, so of course we will need to get more refined later on, but it's a good basis, I think, because these are the sort of things that whenever you approach a game, you might place yourself in one of these 4 categories and say, yes, this is what I am looking forward when I sit down to play Monopoly. I want Agon. I want to defeat the others. For example, I want the Alea. I want to roll the dice and get the doubles and etc. etc.
Exactly.
And we all can see the echo of that in many, many things. The question is, what's the thing which you most enjoy? The Alea is not just about the fact that the game revolves around luck. It's the fact that before you roll your die, you savor that moment. That's the moment that, okay, everything hinges on this roll. This is an awesome feeling, and that's what I want to get. I want to get that feeling.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that this is probably the earliest text that you managed to get. And when I studied sociology, I read, I think it was from 1975 something, another text that was about specifically role-playing games, the first socio-text about role-playing games. And this is really late for people to start researching play and game and what's going on in these fields. But I think it's because the whole concept of approaching games and leisure activity as something worthy of questioning, of investigation, is
research
is really late 20th century sort of thing. It's really new. So we are discovering new fields as we go. I mean, in video games, this is a lot more advanced than it is in other fields. And we'll maybe get to it later when we discuss it just a bit, because video games, even though they are younger than role-playing games, both have mainstream appeal and huge companies behind them
a lot of money.
Would love to invest. Yeah, exactly. They love money and want to invest a lot of money in finding ways to make interesting games the people we want. So they want to know why people like games. So that's probably not surprising. But in the role-playing game world, we are in a situation where we have, I think, at least 10 different models to work with, each totally different from the others, or seems so close to one another that you ask yourself, aren't they the same model? I'll give a link to in the show notes to role-playing games theory in Wikipedia. You can just look at how many things there are there, because there's so little research. So thank you very much for doing some research, Avner, and providing us with some interesting answers.
Just one more thing from the original sociological text, which will come up later, so I will mention them. He also described an axis between what he called Paidia and Ludus. Paidia is the sort of free play where you enjoy the sheer exuberance of play. When kids run around playing tag, most of the time they're not actually trying to catch each other, they're just enjoying the activity. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have Ludus, which is enjoyment of a game that has rules, of having rules and knowing the rules and winning by the rules.
And he contrasts them one with the other. He says there are two different things and you can't have them both.
Yeah.
Which fit in very nicely with freeform role-playing games and mechanic-heavy role-playing games.
Yes, exactly. So, apparently I was not the first person to read the sociological text and apply to role-playing games, because as I continued looking, I found a fantastic site, which obviously had, people had read Glenn Blackow and read Robin D. Laws and read Caillois, and have sat down to see how they can merge all these together to have one unified concept of why we play role-playing games. And that turned out to be the core of my lecture and the core of my blog post and the core of the last time we did this episode. Because these are people from a group called Amagi Games. I don't know their games, but I did find their very interesting discussion. It started out in several forums about 10 years ago, was refined there, and then was published as what they called the manifold model. If we mentioned the GNS model earlier that talked about the threefold model, 3 ways to play a game, they said, no, this is the manifold model. We have many ways to get enjoyment from how we play, and we want to understand why. So this manifold model is, I think, one of the most fascinating texts of role-playing theory I've read. It really helped me wrap my mind around a lot of the things I do in my gaming sessions. When I play, to understand why I play the way I play. For instance, as I mentioned earlier, I played a lot of Ars Magica, and I really enjoy playing those minor characters in a scene. I mean, I like being the central character, but I really enjoy being a minor character, just, have this comment once in a while in a scene that can shift the conversation one way or add a bit of humor the other. And other players don't like that. I've played with players who like to be the main character in a scene. They really don't enjoy being a secondary character. Well, I do, because I feel that just like I like secondary characters when I read a novel or when I watch a TV show, a lot of times I really enjoy watching them, so I also enjoy playing them. And this model, this list of player motivations when approaching a role-playing game, really helped me understand myself, understand how I play and why I play.
Now we'll go over the complete list of the many, many different motivations that you as a player or as a GM might have when coming to the table. We'll go over each and every one of them, and Avner will explain what's their deeper meaning. And I would beseech any listener to maybe even take a pen and paper and mark down which of these are the one you really enjoy and which of these are the one you really don't care for. This could be an amazing exercise for yourself to understand what makes you tick as someone who's going to have a role-playing experience.
Best of luck with that, because people listen to us on the go and will never sit down with anything.
Well, then maybe they will say, God, that was a good suggestion. I can't believe I haven't done that. I should definitely go home, rethink my ways, and then listen to this episode with pen and paper.
So this list of 17 terms, of course, not exclusive. People naturally will have more than one motivation when they come to the gaming table. And of course, it's important to notice that this list isn't all-encompassing, and there will be many other motivations that people might come to the table with, and it's really interesting to find any more. Actually, after the last time we recorded this in Hebrew, Eran came up with 2 other motivations that I really think can be added to the list quite nicely. and we'll get
Oh,
to them
really?
at the end.
Okay, let us do it.
Okay. The first of them, alphabetically speaking, is Agon, or Agon. Straight from the old sociological text. It means the enjoyment of winning against another person at the table. Specifically at the table. It's not about beating a challenge. It's not about having a difficult boss fight and using all your daily powers and winning. It's about being better than another person around the table.
This seems to be, perhaps I think, for many people, alien to the role-playing game experience, where they think I'm not sitting down around a table to win against someone else. But there are role-playing games where this definitely happens. It happens a bit in Paranoia, for example, where many players compete against each other in game. It happens in a game like Agon, which is it's the name of the game, which is all about players fighting players. And they are very interesting games.
This is also true about some aspects of Ars Magica, which I've never mentioned beforehand, in which there is oftentimes a lot of competition between the different wizards around the table, depending on how you play the game.
There are rules for dueling, especially for this.
Yep.
Yeah, but as you said, it's not as common in tabletop role playings unless this is what the game is about.
Yes.
It's very common in other forms of games, in board games, in video games, a very common element. And of course, there are a lot of overlap. There's a lot of overlap between role-playing games and other forms of games. We're not, alone in the void. Personally, I am not a fan of Agon in role-playing games or in other forms of games, but other people are.
Yes, same.
Next, again from the earlier list, is Alea, the gambler's thrill, it is described. It's the fun of taking a big risk, the tension that comes with it, and the release of that tension when the die is rolled and the 20 comes up or the 1 comes up, and either you win or you don't. This is the form of motivation that drives people to gambling, that's true, but it's part of what people enjoy. It adds tension that you won't get any other way in the game. And of course, some people don't enjoy it. Some people enjoy diceless role-playing games because this is not what they come to this game for.
Or they might use games with dice, but not look forward to the roll as something super important. Like, for example, if I'm a very tactical player, getting a 20 is excellent because now I dealt more damage. But it happens 1 in 20 rolls, and I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
And I try to make sure that whatever action I take this turn, it will be relevant and useful, even if I fail, because statistically it will happen this and that. I'm not looking forward to the roll, to the luck. I'm not getting excited when I see the die. I just roll it because that's part of the rules that I use.
And on the complete opposite, I occasionally would do things that has a much larger chance of being a huge success or a huge failure, rather than go with the thing with the best chance of having a positive outcome, because I like it when I have extreme success or extreme failure, because that enhances the moment of the role.
I should note that getting the success or the failure, story-wise, is a different motivation that we'll get to later. Simply having the success because the die landed in something, that's the enjoyment of Alea.
Yeah, so far we've talked about player motivations and what players enjoy. What we haven't talked about, and probably won't much, is how games can be designed to tap into one of these motivations or more. And for instance, exploding dice is a mechanic that really feeds into Alea. It makes you look forward to that 6 so you can roll another die.
I was going to it in a moment because that's probably one of the things that I really like in Savage Worlds. There's a lot of Alea. You have exploding dice, and you have bennies that you can spend in order to reroll the dice, and you get dealt cards, which again, all of these are simple tiny moments where you have this, when you lean forward and look forward to whatever is going to happen in a moment.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on. We have a lot of motivations. The next is catharsis. Catharsis is a common term used in drama and theater. It's the feeling of release that follows an intense or overwhelming experience.
I think this might be what Uri just referred to a moment before, the excitement of having this big moment. It was because the die got this and that, but the moment itself is the catharsis, I think.
No. I also enjoy Catharsis a lot. I'm going to give a specific example from 2 days ago. We started the session with me telling one of the other players, listen, dude, unlike the previous campaign, I'm not going to let you finish this one without any of us knowing anything about your character and its backstory. I demand that you tell us more about your character and about its backstory, and my character is going to ask about your character's backstory constantly. And we played the session, and at the end of that session, there was a boss fight, and in that boss fight, his character died. And that was terrible. It was a terrible moment. You know, the guy's playing that character for months, and she dies horribly. And I felt ecstatic because there was a catharsis to it. That was a death worth dying, because I will never know. I will never have the chance to ask that character about its background and what made it tick. And that was a cathartic moment for me, because it was sort of an in-game experience which left me in a state of, that tension of needing to get that information, which I will never get. I was relieved in a way.
I think there's an important lesson here. Trying to get to the tiny minute details of exactly what sort of action or experience in the game is what specific motivation by name isn't important. It's not that big of a deal. We shouldn't probably do that. And we should let Avner go on.
Go, Avner, go!
Another motivation, I accidentally skipped the alphabetical order because it's not actually part of the original model. It was added in a later text, but I liked, and I included it in my version of the model, called Asabiyyah. This one's from Arabic, not from Greek or Latin, just for variety. And it means unity, or the enjoyment of working as a team towards a shared goal.
The basis of all co-op games.
Yep.
Yes. While most of these motivations aren't mutually exclusive, Asabiyyah and Agon kind of, contradict.
You probably can't play a game when you have both of them at exactly the same moment.
Yes. Unless, you have a, 2 against 2 game.
Oh, okay, sure.
The reason I like this motivation is because it took something that I didn't even think about.
Yes.
And made it explicit.
Yes. It's something that is, I think many role players assume it as a part of any group, of any game. And they should. It's an important part of role-playing game. But I think that a lot of us, when we don't get it for some reason, feel like we missed something and we don't know what. Well, now I know. I've missed the Asabiyyah. I missed the part of where we acted as a group. When we had, the archer shots and the face talked and everyone did their thing. And we managed to achieve amazing feats of whatever, and it was awesome and it was great, and I had lots of fun. Now I know why.
Yeah, and it could be a role-playing thing or a mechanical thing, but, that feeling of, we work together like a well-oiled machine.
I think most people feel it in its lack when there's someone at the group keeping secret from the group.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the classic D&D moment of, so do you tell the rest of the party about X? No, I don't. And like everyone at the table are, that son of a bitch. And now you know why.
Moving on. Next motivation is closure. Closure is the satisfaction of having a story arc come to its conclusion. It's the feeling you get when you close a good book and you say, that story ended well. And in role-playing games, stories tend to start the moment they end to interlap. So you can have lots of moments of closure at the same time.
I think there's a big difference between this and catharsis. Because I think catharsis is, as you've said before, it's the feeling of elation, of having a powerful moment, while closure is more dramatically satisfying construction that has ended. And by that I mean, you need to have a story in order to have closure. Something should have happened, and then something happened, and now a third thing needs to happen. We all feel it. It's our inner dramatic urges call for us to have this third thing happen. And when it happens, we get closure.
Yeah, catharsis is the release of an emotional tension. Well, closure is the closing of a narrative tension. They can go together.
Yes.
If it's that kind of story you're telling.
Hopefully.
But they don't have to.
Yes.
Next. Up until now, it may look like we were going over a dictionary for literature students, but now we're going into things that are more gaming-oriented. Expression. It is the enjoyment of being creative at the table. And again, the first time I read it, I said, obviously, it's not, is it a motivation? And then I said, yes, because it's something that people enjoy and other people might not enjoy as much or enjoy differently. People come to the table and they describe what they're doing and they describe the scenery, because a lot of game masters come with a lot of this motivation, and we haven't mentioned it, but a lot of these things apply to GMs as well as players.
Oh yes.
GMs are players as well.
I think there's an inherent language flaw here, because we say players when, in the context of this episode, we mean people who play the game.
We should say participants, even.
Probably, yeah.
Should we?
And of course, the GM is one of the participants in that experience, which is a role-playing game.
Exactly.
So expression is, well, when we play role-playing games, we are engaging in a creative activity. We're inventing things. We're inventing a story. We're inventing characters. We're being creative. And for some people, this is not what they don't really care for that. It's not what they come to the game for. For others, it's a creative outlet. This is what they're here to. They draw the characters. They fill their mind. They go home and they write fan fiction for the characters in their role-playing game. If you see someone writing a 15-page backstory for their character, you know that they might come here for the expression.
Well, just to make clear, I, for example, don't really like to express my character. When I play as a player character, when I'm a player, I don't think I really have this motivation. I do have it in loads as a GM, and for some different things, some various things. Like, for example, I really enjoy creating an enticing atmosphere by description. I want people to feel something, the players. I want them to immerse themselves in something, and I want to be the one who makes them immersed. I want to be the person that, thanks to my participation in this experience, in this game, I made them feel as if they are in this market stall or whatever.
Which is interesting, because I think most people have different motivation when they're GMing and different motivation when they come to the table as players.
Oh, yes.
And also different systems might bring out different motivations from people. Different games, different tables.
It's true.
Okay, next. The next one is a motivation that is talked about a lot in video game development as well. It's called fiero. I think this one's Italian, but don't, hold me to it. Fiero is a feeling of triumph, of having a challenge and defeating it. The challenge is usually, in a video game, it's very clear. It's a hard game, and you beat the boss. And you beat the boss without dying. And this is the fiero. This is what I'm talking about. This is the feeling of, I'm the greatest.
Woohoo!
Now, this is what I think a lot of people sort of assume is a default in role-playing. A default. I think a lot of people come to the game and expect to have challenges and then overcome them, and then feel a lot of fun from overcoming the challenges. When actually I basically just described D&D and Pathfinder, but a lot of other systems do a lot of other different stuff. And after I've learned this word fiero from you, Avner, I finally realized what is probably the most important difference between Dungeon World and Powered by the Apocalypse games and D&D. And what is the biggest problem for D&D players who approach Dungeon World and say, wait, I just attacked this, but I don't feel satisfied from defeating it. There wasn't the whole thing of overcoming a challenge. Right. There's no challenge in Dungeon World. There's no challenge in Powered by the Apocalypse. You roll, and the story continues in some way. You didn't overcome anything. And many GMs don't know how to run combats that don't have Fiero as the main goal.
Yeah, that whether you roll high or roll low, the story continues, but either you hit or you miss, but it doesn't change the flow of the narrative.
Yes.
It redirects it. I'm also not a fan of Fiero.
Oh, I love Fiero. I just want to make it clear. I enjoy it very much. I just think, there's a place and a time for everything. Yes.
Yeah, but like Agon, I don't enjoy it in video games. I usually turn it down the difficulty level to the very lowest one. And I'm not a huge fan of it in role-playing games either, because I like the drama of a big combat, but not really the challenge.
I think it's really interesting how only in recent years you've seen video games the option of playing on a difficulty that is called something like just the story, or I'm just here for the experience, or something like that. Because before that, it was sort of an assumption, again, in video games as well, that you are here to be challenged. You are here because you want Fiero. To win. You want to win. And that's so no longer the case. And so many games are now aware of it, but maybe only like last 10 years or something like that.
Yeah, and personally, I'm very glad that the industry has moved there because I enjoy it.
Yes, it's a very good thing.
It's also a very good indication of whether this game has an interesting world / character, etc. I remember Mass Effect having the option of story mode, in which I think that's when me and Avner started talking about that, as he was playing Mass Effect on story mode. And I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because it has an amazing story and world and narrative and characters. And other games, so I don't know, Doom or Duke Nukem, you will not play on story mode because then you will start playing and get, the ending credits.
I don't think they even have story mode exactly because of this. That's not why you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mentioned that D&D is very Fiero oriented, or Pathfinder, which is true, but the problem with that is that D&D is for many people, what role playing is.
Yes.
We're deep in the industry, so we know all sorts of games, and we know, if you don't want Fiero, you can play Dungeon World. But for many people, D&D is the game they came into the hobby with and still play. And a lot of people come to play D&D and then they don't want Fiero. They don't even know that they don't want Fiero. And this is exactly the sort of mismatch around the table that leads to people not having enough fun.
Completely agree. Hopefully, people will now listen to this episode, share it with their friends, point at this time in the episode and tell them, here, listen to this, and see, there are various tons of things. We can maybe change the game, maybe tune it a little while, and we'll get to how to use this list after we finish with it.
Yes. Next, humor. Yes. Does humor belong in gaming? Absolutely. Well, if it's the sort of game where it fits. I'm not talking about humorous games, this game is humorous, it's paranoia, it's whatever. It's people who like to laugh and like to make other people laugh, and they do it in their regular life and they do it around the table because this is what they enjoy.
It's your motivation. One of the reasons you come to play is because you want to have some humor in the game.
And again, this is a classic case for conflict. It's, we're a group of friends and we used to play D&D and, lots of laughs and fun. And now one of the players is pushing to play a serious Vampire the Masquerade game. But suddenly they discover that some people don't enjoy a game that doesn't have humor.
Yes.
And if and other people, they want a serious, emotional game about, dramatic vampires, and the humor ruins it for them. It takes a while to understand that these are different motivations that might conflict around the table.
Yep.
Next, we're coming back to the Latin words. No, sorry, Greek. Kairosis. Kairosis is very similar to closure that we mentioned earlier, but this is the feeling of fulfillment when a character's story arc completes.
That sounds kind of specific.
It's kind of specific, but I think this is one of the interesting ones because it's unique, I think, to a role-playing game rather than other forms of media. When you watch a TV show, there might be a character you particularly like and you're invested in their character story arc. which is sort of like this. I don't really care about the main story. I want to see how this character works out. I want to see how this character develops.
Their
In a role-playing
journey.
game, this is my character. This is my investment, my emotional investment is even bigger. So this is not just a general closure about, the story has come to an end, everyone's happy, we killed the evil duke and saved the land. This is my character, my main input into the game, and having their main story arc progress and the satisfaction that it brings me.
I definitely had this when I played Wrath of the Righteous. It's a Pathfinder adventure path a few years back, and I had a character, Zamlofia, who was a paladin, and I had a character arc for her, and I really enjoyed playing the character arc for its sake. I just liked having Zamlofia go through this and have her own journey and become this evil paladin and then seek redemption. All of this shit. It was awesome.
Exactly. Next one, also Greek, kenosis. Kenosis is the satisfaction from being deeply engaged and attached to your character. It seems very similar to what we just said, but again, like we had Catharsis, which is the emotional release, while closure is the narrative release, this is similar. Kairosis is enjoying the narrative of your character's story arc. Kenosis is the enjoyment of playing your character, of feeling, acting out your character, having your character's emotions bleed into you, and the emotional aspect of playing a character, of being a character in a role-playing game.
But this is super interesting because I don't have this for Zamlofia. I don't enjoy playing as her. I really want mine just speaking in third person about her all the time. I just gain no enjoyment from experiencing her and sympathizing with her. I just want to see her story arc.
You mentioned a couple of episodes ago when you were talking about speaking in the first or third person of your character.
Yes.
And this is this is what kenosis is about. People who enjoy kenosis will probably play more, speak in the first person about their character because they enjoy getting into their character.
Very interesting.
Next, another motivation that sounds really sounds like the previous one, kinesis. Not kenosis, kinesis. It's, like kinetic, something that moves. It's enjoyment of moving things, of having miniatures around on the table, on the map, having a map, having something, having a game book that you flip through to look for the rules.
Actual physical stuff that you get to touch and move and stuff like that.
And again, when I read it originally, I said, okay, now you're just saying things. But, because it doesn't feel like an important thing, like, plot or characters or things like that. But you can't ignore the fact that this is part of our hobby. This is part of what we do. We deal with miniatures not only because they give us a sense of tactical overview of the combat. People like messing around with their miniatures. People like building towers out of their dice.
I just enjoy having dice and rolling dice and placing them around and having a character sheet. And yeah, sure.
Yeah, and, scribbling in the corner of your character sheet because, it's your character sheet and you can do whatever you want on it, is a motivation.
I would say if there's someone who's thinking, nah, that's not a motivation, simply go to your gaming group and tell them, okay, we're not doing miniature anymore. We're going to play with tokens. And just see if there's a discussion or a full-scale battle starting at that moment.
No, there can be groups when it's not really important because, again, motivations, people have different motivations. But I can say that as a person that thought that this is not really important to me, when moving to Roll20 or other virtual tabletops, I feel something missing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not only talking about the fact that other people are not present and I need to now talk to them using microphone stuff. I mean the fact that there's no table, no things to me to move, no character sheet for me to hold. And I had to find a replacement because I need this. I want this. And I found it in the way of just having a lot of interesting, cool stuff on the screen that I can move and using the maps and using tokens and rolling a 3D die because I want to see them. I want to see them roll. I want to watch them roll on my screen.
I discovered that if I am in a Roll20 session and the sound of the dice rolling is muted, I would freak out. That's not natural.
In my Alzheimer's group, we usually play on couches. We don't sit around the gaming table when we play. We would, spread around on the couches and move around a bit. That's our main dynamic. Whereas in the Fate Accelerated game I play with Uri, we always sit around the table. And the two games are not, I would say that it's not because, in the Fate Accelerated game we need more dice and more character sheets and be aware of them. No, the Alzheimer's game was probably more mechanically complicated. We rolled more dice and we needed the rulebooks more. But we were players that approached it differently. We had a different physical environment for our games, and it affected. I think it's about the kinesis. It's about what we want to interact with during the game. So the dice were there. We would roll it, but the rest of the time they were just lying there because no one really cared to play with them. Next, Ludus. So I mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the Ludus Paidia divide, the game, the structured versus unstructured play. And Ludus is the motivation for people who enjoy the rules.
Yes.
They enjoy knowing the rules. They enjoy
using the rules for their favor.
The rules. They enjoy overcoming challenges by using rules. They enjoy finding loopholes in the rules or using the rules to their best advantage. They like the mechanical aspect of the game.
Now, it's important to distinguish, again, this doesn't mean that you are a rule lawyer. It just means you enjoy having the rules and using them. And my wife is an excellent example. She loves rules, but not all the rules and not all the time. She would play the hackeriest hacker you can imagine in Shadowrun because it has such deliberate and focused and specialized rules. And she wants to go through all of them and read all of it and make the best hacker she can. And good for her. But she's not as interested in other parts of the rules, even off Shadowrun, because that's not her thing. So it's important to note that if you have or don't have a motivation, it's not a yes or no thing. It's not rule lawyer or freeform. It's a ladder or something.
In our Ars Magica game, we played, I think, on and off for about 18 years through 3 editions. And there were people who played in the game for, I think, almost 10 years and could not calculate their lab research total to save their life because it never interested them. And there were other players in the game who knew other people's lab research totals for them because they enjoyed calculating it for them. So it was a great synergy. I don't know what my lab total is. You ask that guy. He knows your lab. He knows exactly where things are in your lab and what's your score in this and what's your score in that.
And more importantly, our main point is it's not that he knows. He enjoys knowing.
Yes.
That's part of the enjoyment. Because I've known games in which, one player would learn the rules of another player's character to help him out or to speed up things, etc. But, he did this to help, not because he enjoyed it. And one of our main points here is that some people know all the rules or a subset of all the rules because they like that.
Yes.
That's part of the main reason they're playing. This is their fun.
People who optimize, who build optimized builds of characters, from level 1 to 20 in D&D that, I'll take this feat and it will feed into that feat. So it's level 15. When I take it will feed into that and we'll have an unstoppable juggernaut at level 20. And they do it not because they want an unstoppable juggernaut to play. This is not about, the power of the character. It's about managing to build an unstoppable juggernaut using the tools that the rules give me.
Yep.
Next, the next motivation, I have to say, up until now, all the motivations were either ones I shared or ones I didn't share but understood. This was the first one that took me a while to even understand what it meant. And I think it was you guys in the previous version of this episode that really made me understand it. It's called Naches.
Yes.
This one's from Yiddish.
Naches.
Naches. And it's the enjoyment of seeing someone that you have taught or you're responsible for go on to do well. to do great things.
This is, again, it doesn't sound like it has any room around the gaming table, but it so totally does. And I can say so and Uri, of course, can say so. We love teaching the game and seeing other people enjoying it more. And this is why we do the podcast. For Naches. Uri and I just have this huge motivation.
Exactly. I know Uri always loves running games to new players. When people that have heard about the hobby and are interested in the hobby saying, is there anyone that can help us get into it? And always there.
Yes.
Always there. And he will pull them kicking and screaming into the hobby because he enjoys bringing people into the fold. And this is exactly the sort of motivation.
Also, on occasion, it would bleed into the game. In my previous character, Best Revel Skill from the Magdima Revel Skill, you might have heard of them. He had the leadership feat, and he had other NPCs which he looked after. And if those NPCs would gain levels and experience, etc., that would make me very happy, even though it's totally virtual, etc.
So this might not usually be a motivation to come to the table, but it is a motivation to come to the hobby. The hobby is not just what we do around the table. If we talked earlier about the kinesis, people enjoy, they used to enjoy, don't do it much, painting their own miniatures. And this is part of the game, even if it's not something they do around the gaming table. They still enjoy the messing around and painting their own miniatures. So this is enjoying bringing people to the hobby and, having a podcast to talk to people about it. Next, we talked earlier about Ludus, and now the other end of the Ludus spectrum is Paidia. Freewheeling player fun. It's the fun of the experience. Just, seeing around. You have it a lot in LARPs, for instance. I think it's very strong in LARPs where you don't necessarily enjoy the rules of the game, but you do enjoy the very experience of going around in character, talking to people in character. This is a sort of free-form fun that LARPs really give.
It's, I would say, it's a more of an unstructured experience, unburdened by rules.
A lot of people who like their role-playing to be free-form, who like their role-playing to just flow, talk to people, something happens, something else happens, you respond, you react. You don't structure it with combat rounds and, feats and what I can do. It's sort of like maybe feeds into improv in one aspect. It's the unstructured part of the game. If it sounds like I'm a bit hesitant, it's because it's a definition that I feel is a bit defined by what it isn't and not by what it is. It's really about not liking rules more than about liking something
So maybe
concrete.
If we try to make it a positive definition, I would say it's the ability to act in which way you want without some sort of a constraint being placed upon your range of possibilities.
That's a very good definition. I remember back in the late 80s when I first heard about Dungeons and Dragons, and I tried to understand what this game is and why it's different, because it felt like it's something big and new and different than everything I knew. And I remember reading somewhere that, you go into a house, your character goes into a house, okay, I go into a house, and there are stairs. You want to go up them? Sure. And, do you want your character to go up the stairs doing a handstand, walking on their hands? And I said, wow, I can just do that. I don't need a game that's built for walking on your hands up the stairs. I can just do whatever it is I want. And this is sort of freedom that I think is the Paidia motivation. It's sort of freedom that role-playing games give us and many other games don't.
I used to call it the pee on his head test, because I had an argument with a friend about a computer game versus role-playing game, and he said, yeah, but that has all the possibility of the story is really vast and you have so many options. And I said, okay, so what scene are you playing now? And he said, I'm in this cavern and I'm talking with the orc chieftain and I'm trying to convince him to whatever. And I said, okay, can you stand up on the table and pee on his head? And he said, no, of course not. And I said, that's what I would do in my game. And if you can't do that in your game, then I don't want to play your game.
Okay.
I was very young, mind you.
I can't top the pee on his head test, so let's move on. The next one is in German, because we haven't had German yet. Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is the enjoyment of seeing other people fall. Again, it's a narrative thing. It's about seeing the villain get their comeuppance. It's about beating the enemy, not because it was a challenge, but because he's been an annoying character and he's been a thorn at your side all game, and you want to see him die. In an old D&D game that Uri ran for me many years ago, we had this recurring villain behind the scenes. It took a couple of years of game time to even understand he was behind the scenes. GD, I believe he was. It's the only initials. We only knew his initials. Yep. I joined rather late in the game, but by the time I joined, everyone would just start flexing their fists every time his name was mentioned, because years of plans foiled by this annoying NPC. This became a goal for most of the players, to see him fall by the time the campaign ended.
Good times.
The next one is, and it's an important one, sociability. Earlier I mentioned the 7 types of gamers that Robin D. Laws categorized, and he talked about the casual gamer. And I have to say that his description is a bit...
condescending?
Condescending is exactly the word I would use. It's like, he's not a real gamer. He's just a guy that comes around because his friends are playing. And,
he wrote it in a time where there was such a thing in the culture of a real gamer and someone who is a casual gamer, who is not really into it. And today we can say that there's no such thing as wrong, bad fun, and enjoy it however you want to enjoy it. And sociability, why is it so important then?
It's important because this is the reason why we play games with friends and not, just sit around doing things at home. It's because role-playing games are a social game. We enjoy the company of others. I probably would not want to play with someone I don't like. I can't think of myself role-playing in a group with someone I actively dislike. Because why would I go out drinking with this guy? I don't like him. Why would I go out, to do something else with him? I don't like him. I wouldn't play with him either. No, it's not a technical thing. I come, I roleplay, I go home. I don't have to interact with him. I play with the player as well as with the character. So it's important for the social aspect is an integral part of the role-playing game.
For me, I clearly see it as a motivation because there are games that I'm currently playing in where the main reason the game exists is because I want to still be friends with some people. And this is an activity that allows me to be sociable with them, to interact with them, to have some fun with them.
I had friends that, even though they were friends and I enjoyed their company, I knew that once the game ended, I will probably not keep in touch with them. Unfortunately, because I like them, but I knew that our lives will not be able to properly mesh if we didn't have the game as the social glue here.
Yeah, which is why this is an important motivation.
Very much so. I remember a great GM who once ran me a game, and she wouldn't accept a specific player for our group, even though I recommended him. And I asked her why. And she said, listen, in most cases, my gaming group become a large part of my social life. And if someone is not someone I want to have in my social life, I will not be playing with them. And it took me a long while to understand the wisdom of that.
And the last one is simply venting. We mentioned it earlier about the butt kicker, but this is a great motivation for role-playing games as well as other form of games, as well as sports, as well as a lot of things you do in your life. Sometimes you just want to work out your frustrations, you have emotions, and you just want to have something to channel them into. And a role-playing game can be a great way. It can be the butt kicker we mentioned earlier. You have fight, you kill things die, you have fun. It can be venting through, because you have a character you can vent your emotions through, because you don't have the people to do it personally. Venting is a great motivation and great way to have role-playing games be a productive and constructive part of your life. I think that's all of them.
But not true. You said there are 2 more that I added.
That is true.
Bum, bum,
In,
bum.
in a discussion a few years ago when we recorded the original episode, Iran had two others that he thought of, and one is control. The desire to feel like you have control over things. When you roleplay, you have control over your environment, your character, your whatever that you might not have in other places, and it's a great motivation because it's something that you miss or something that you enjoy that you might not get in other places.
I would argue, as much as I think I argued beforehand, is that if you're not the actual game master, the GM, your main motivation here is not control, rather than agency.
Yes.
You want to
That is a fantastic
feel
term.
that you have the ability to influence things.
To affect change. You're right. Agency is a much better term here. And the other one, which I will tentatively call the Pokemon, is the incentive to collect them all, to amass wealth, to amass power, to amass whatever, to have just one more thing, to get all the in video game it might be to get all the achievements that the game allows you to collect. And in a role-playing game, it might be expressed differently, but still, it's a motivation that can certainly be expressed in mechanics and around the table. You want to catch them all.
I think I agree with myself. Yes, these are.
I wouldn't agree with you so quickly, Aran.
Excellent. But now that we know all of these motivations,
and of course there might be others. You might be able to find others like Iran did.
Oh yes, if you guys think of any new motivations, please do have a conversation with us on our Facebook group on the Shoulders of Dwarves. We might help you define these motivations, these thoughts that you have. We might find that they already sort of maybe matches one of these motivations we've discussed, or maybe you will discover something new, whatever. It can be an interesting discussion. That's how we had it last time. Do go ahead and do it. But here's maybe the biggest question. What do we do with these motivations? How do we actually use them when we want to make our games better?
My initial thought was to have maybe a sort of questionnaire. You have a questionnaire, you give it to your players, you work out some sort of motivation character sheet of a player, not a character. And then when people come to the table, you can match. You can say, okay, I'm looking for players that like humor, don't like too much Ludus, and I don't know, hate Agon. When I talked to people, when I gave the talk, I actually gave out a small survey, and I wanted everyone to mark for each of these motivations whether it's important to him, not important, or important not to have. Which I thought might be nice to have either just to have the raw information or just as a basis for a tool. Mm-hmm. And actually what I ended up thinking is that it's not necessarily effective enough. I mean, I had a guy saying, yeah, I have two regular games. One is a vampire game in which I really care about Catharsis and Kairosis and Kenosis. And another is a paranoia game where I actually absolutely don't care about any of these things. And I care about humor, and I care about, Agon, and I care about other things. So the problem is these things are a bit too flexible. As I said, I don't like Agon. But I might be convinced to like a good Agon game because it doesn't come at the expense of other things. It has characters fighting each other, but I don't feel like it bleeds over to me as a player. I might not enjoy Ludus, but there might be games where the mechanics are simple and straightforward and sharply defined, and I really enjoy them. So I don't know if I can absolutely say that, I'm a XYZ player, give me XYZ games.
But it is a very good tool for you as a player to understand, okay, this game is fun for me because I enjoy A, B, and C, and this game delivers them to me. Or, which I found to be the case for me, when there's something troubling me in a game, I can understand why I'm suddenly not enjoying the game as much as I used to. Asabiyyah for me is an amazing example, because a lot of time I enjoy Asabiyyah tremendously if I'm part of a group and we're all working together to solve something, even if my character hasn't done anything. And I played the bard for 3 years. I wouldn't do anything, but still, if we as a group would overcome an obstacle, I would be ecstatic. And on the other hand, if someone decide to do something outside of the group and do his own thing, that game would be a lot less fun for me. Even if in that same instance, my character would do something very, very much helpful, I still wouldn't enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
And now I can say, okay, that's what troubling me. That is that aspect which I'm now lacking, and that is why I'm not enjoying the game as much.
In one of your last episodes, you spoke about not session 0, but before session 0, how to find the right players for your game. And what you just said, Uri, is how these can be very good tools for an ongoing game or after a couple of sessions to synchronize your expectations. It might be a bit premature to say I only like players who like, Agon, and you might miss out on players that don't know if they like Agon in this particular context.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a great introspection tool, not necessarily a great filtering tool.
Exactly. Because just like you said, your own motivations might change. You might be convinced that some motivations can be retested or, maybe check them again with the system that does this thing differently. I really like Paranoia and how it does Agon, but I don't like Agon in any other way that I've ever encountered. It really depends on so many things.
Yeah, for instance, Ars Magica has detailed rules for magic, and not everyone cares about them, but you might be in a group that will take care of it for you, and it's fine. And even though you don't like Ludus, you might enjoy the game tremendously because this aspect, while it is important to the game master, it's important to the other players, can be skipped over for you. You can outsource it to other people and enjoy the game and be a productive part of the game. Even though if you would have said, no, this is a mechanical heavy game, I won't even approach it.
Yes, exactly.
Which would be a shame.
I think it's really useful also for us, even on a per session basis, to just look at this experience that I'm going to have, this session that is upcoming, and ask myself what kind of motivations I'm looking forward today, and maybe how I can maybe try to accomplish them. Because today I just want to roll some dice and defeat some monsters. I had a long day at work. I don't really care about everything else right now. We're in a part of the story that isn't as interesting to me, or maybe it is interesting, but I don't. Too many drama and I just want to kill a goblin or two. And maybe I can have a talk with the GM before we start and say, just explain myself. If you and the GM, of course, know each other well enough, the GM will get it in a moment just by looking at you and how you behave. We all telegraph our wants very well, even if we don't really know them ourselves a lot of the time. And I think that the main thing for me was with this whole thing is the switch in my head between categorization and motivation. Because before that, I tried to decide what I am. Am I this kind of gamer? Am I this kind of thing? And then I thought, after your explanation, well, what are more motivations? Do I like this thing? Do I like this thing? But just categorization in different words. It's really best to just look at the motivations as things to consider and, like you said, to introspect, to use when you think about, not as definitions or self-definitions in any way.
They're not what I am. They're just things I like.
Yes.
In the context of usually a specific game with specific people.
Exactly.
Because a lot of times someone would join in the game, would change the flavoring of the game, and you might think, this is a new and interesting direction. Why not go with it?
Yeah. You might not care about, the story arc until the story arc becomes closer to you and suddenly you care about it.
Yes, exactly. Excellent. Is there anything else we want to add? Well, actually, I have two things I want to add. Just two links for people that want to maybe read more about things around this topic. First is Quantic Foundry. Quantic Foundry are a research group working with mostly video games, but also board games about this topic of player motivations. They don't yet have role-playing game motivations, but you should really definitely go there and do their questionnaires and see what kind of motivations you have as a board gamer and as a video gamer, and they give recommendation and explain themselves. The questionnaires are really interesting. You should really go through it, and the results will, again, not tell you who you are, but what sort of things you, generally speaking, enjoy. And maybe you can take some of that into your role-playing game as well.
I've tried using that questionnaire first for real, and then I tried to use it for a role-playing game. Obviously, it didn't translate quite as well, but still a very, very interesting tool to look at to get introspection about yourself.
The second thing I want to recommend is called The Righteous Mind. It's a book about social psychology by Jonathan Haidt or Haidt. I don't know how to pronounce this name. And it's about morality and how morality is sort of, well, that's a theory he suggests, these 6 topics on each of which you have 2 poles, and every person give different priorities to each of the topics and places themselves on different places on the poles. And that's actually what morality is all about. And that's why one person will think that this thing is really bad and that thing is really good. And another person will not even understand why the first person think that this topic has anything to do with morality at all. That's very much, I think, on the same vein as what we were talking about here. And so go ahead and read it. What about you, Uri? How would you summarize this?
Well, I have the big advantage of looking and hearing this list for the 4th or 5th time. We did an episode about that. Avner did a lecture. I read this in his blog years ago. And I've, processed this for a long time, both in my role-playing games and as an improviser in a group. And it's amazing how finely tuned you get when you use this list. How you can say, wow, I've noticed this player really enjoyed this aspect. Let me test this by using that aspect again, and oh my God, he just fell for it again. And once you think, okay, now I understand what makes my players tick, and I can use this to enhance their gaming experience. And then my next big leap was, as a player, seeing, okay, this fellow player is really enjoying that specific. He really enjoys Agon. He really enjoys that sense of victory. So me, as a bard or a swashbuckler or warlord or whatever, can enhance that specific aspect of the game for him. If I would talk about how our opponents seem really, really strong, what I'm actually doing is enhancing the fiero that other players will get. So it's a very useful tool for understanding other people, understanding what they enjoy, and eventually using it to enhance their experience.
Excellent. Avner, any last words?
I think going over this list originally really helped me, not feel bad about things that I enjoyed. It's like, I'm not playing it wrong, I'm just playing it that way. It's because, I remember a specific session where I didn't do anything for a whole scene except have a small comment that made other people laugh, and I felt that was a good scene. And now I can say why.
Okay, why don't we go on to the next part of our episode, which is taking the load off.
This is the part of the show in which we talk a bit about role-playing games in our lives. So basically like whatever we just did before, but on a personal basis. Uri, what have you been role-playing this week?
Well, 2 days ago, I had an amazing Pathfinder session. It was awesome because I went very focused, even though I was tired, and we played. And I said to this player, listen, you're doing amazing and you're awesome. And I'm not going to let you get away without telling us the whole backstory of your character. And that player looked at me and he said, you know what? You're right. I'm going to share and I'm going to tell you my backstory and we're going to make this campaign awesome. And then we went to a boss fight and then we went to a bigger boss fight and then his character died horrifically. And I have to say, the minute his character died, I was so happy because from a narrative perspective, it was such a fitting end. It was a cathartic moment to
One would
build
say.
upon what we've been talking in this episode. And there was a discussion around the table. Should we pool our resources and find a cleric and maybe raise dead or resurrect that character? And we all agreed, of course, that it's the player's choice whether he wants to continue playing that character or not. And I was just sitting there and thinking, God, no. If you have to die, you should die in a huge boss battle a second after you practically killed the big villain.
And the second after you said something like, yeah, I'm retiring next week.
Yes,
and
exactly.
It was such an epic moment, and going back on it would hugely diminish my enjoyment of the game. But I haven't said anything because it's not my character and it's not just my enjoyment. So it was a great and wonderful moment.
It was a story arc and a character arc that you enjoyed the completion of.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. I haven't played this week, unfortunately, at all. But instead, I really worked hard on a new professional website for myself because it's apparently time.
Which looks awesome.
Thank you. I'm not really sure it works. I'm not sure it's professional enough that, like, when you read it, you say, yes, I would like to hire this person to do this and that and that. It might be a bit confusing, but you can be the judge. eranaviram.me. And there's, of course, link in the show notes. And I also posted a review on the Mistborn Adventure game. Now, it's a really long review because apparently I don't remember how to do them shorter. But
Eran, a review is never long. It is thorough. Okay?
Exactly. So it's an excellent game. It's a really good game, the Mistborn Adventure game, and I explain why in the review. But just to summarize, if you enjoy role-playing games in general and are curious to see what sort of interesting things can be done with them, what tools, mechanical tools can we use in our games, you should probably check it out. That's about it. Avner.
Unfortunately, I do not have any role-playing tales from this past week because my current game with Uri has been on hiatus since we both had children this past year and a bit. So I will, listen to you and your role-playing stories and, miss it.
Then how about you plug yourself and tell us where we can find you on the internet?
I will plug myself. I am usually on Twitter. My Twitter alias is very hard to pronounce out loud, but it will be in the show notes. It is Lizardgy. Lizardgy. No, it is not supposed to be pronounceable. I have a blog. The link will also be in the show notes. It's mostly in Hebrew. My Twitter is also mostly in Hebrew, but I respond in English and will gladly talk about role-playing or whatever.
I urge all of you to tweet at Avner. He has amazing insights and he responds, unlike many people on Twitter.
Also, you can, of course, engage with him on our Facebook group where he occasionally visits and say some things.
I do.
If you want to engage with us in any other way as well, you can do so because we have an email address and it's show@dwarfcast.net. And also, we exist on Twitter and Facebook at Dwarf Podcast. And our website is dwarfcast.net. And that's it. That's basically it. There's no more ends. except for our Patreon page, because if you enjoy us and you think that this is really awesome, and you say, wow, these guys, they provide so much interesting and cool things for free, we say yes, and we'll keep it for free.
But if you want to show your appreciation in a monetary fashion and also help us improve this podcast, our equipment, and allow us to buy a lot more PDFs to read, then you can definitely do so on our Patreon page.
Which is patreon.com/dwarfcast. And that's it. Thank you very much, Avner, for coming and guesting and talking. And again, once more, for the 14th gazillionth time, going through the whole list of all motivations and being enthusiastic about it, because I really think this can be really helpful.
It has been for me, and I'm glad to have the chance to talk.
So, on the count of 3, we will all bid goodbye to our listeners, each in his own native tongue. 1, 2, 3. Later.
On the Shoulders of Dwarves is shared under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial form. The intro and outro are taken from Silly Fun by Kevin MacLeod. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3. Find us at dwarfcast.net and follow us on Twitter or Facebook.